How you doing? I'm Big D. Thank you for stopping in. I do appreciate it. Um, Before we get into the show, I gotta give you a little disclaimer. I am not a professional in this. I just do this for my own personal and for my own family. Um, Conduct your own thorough research from multiple credible sources. I hope you consider me as a credible source because where I have pulled my information comes from very good sources, in my opinion. Now, before making any financial decision, consult a qualified professional who can provide guidance specific to your individual circumstances. Now, we have multiple record breaking with silver this year, with gold, the NASDAQ, the Dow, the S&P. You can look at maybe a possibility that Donald Trump is one of the key reasons for this, or not. You might look at the ex-president, his administration. You might think that they're the ones who began and Trump is taking the credit. That's up to you. I'm not going to go into politics right now. But if you have a comment and you like to state it in the comment section, I do appreciate it. I don't care what you want to comment about. You want to talk about silver? You want to talk about gold, the Dow, S&P, NASDAQ? You want to talk about how the media is holding back on most of this research that we're going to talk about today? But buried in the COMEX exchange reports, something far more dangerous just surfaced. Some of the information that I just found, it's crazy. JP Morgan, the largest bank in America, quietly excited a $4.8 billion position in the silver derivatives. On paper, that looks like a massive loss. But here's what should grab our attention. They don't actually lose anything. They flipped the entire game. Between June and October this year, JP Morgan transformed from holding a 200 million ounce paper short position, essentially betting against silver, to accumulation a 750 million ounce physical long position. Now that's the largest stockpile of physical silver in recorded history. We're not talking about contracts or promises or electronic entries into a database. We're talking about actual metal sitting in an actual vault under JP Morgan's actual control. Think about what that really means for a moment. Now, this is the same bank that spent decades suppressing silver prices through paper contracts. They paid $920 million settlement to the Department of Justice in 2020 for manipulating precious metals market. They were the villains of a silver story, the institution everyone pointed to as the reason silver stayed artificially cheap while gold soared. And now quietly, they've become the largest holder of physical silver on planet Earth. Now, when the biggest short seller in market suddenly becomes the biggest long holder, what does that tell you about where they think prices are heading? The first week of December 2025 provided the answer in speculator fashion. COMEX registered silver inventory, the actual deliverable metal that backs all those paper contracts. I call them fake silver, paper silver, whatever. Now, they're trading on the exchange, dropped 60% in just 4 days. 47.6 million ounces simply vanished from the registry category. Claimed by contract holders demanding physical delivery instead of cash settlements. At the same time, silver prices surged past $59 and a premium for physical coins and bars over spot price hit levels we haven't seen since the panic buy of the early 2020s. Now here's where the mathematical um, becomes unavoidable. Right now, COMEX has about 194 million ounces of total silver inventory in its vaults. That sounds like a lot until you realize there are 474 million ounces worth of open interest in silver futures contracts. The paper physical ratio sits at 244% translation. The exchange has made promise to deliver more than twice as much silver as actually exists in its vault. It's a fractional reserve system, which, just like banking, except you can't print silver when everyone shows up to make withdrawals. You know, like how our government does it, just print more paper dollar. JP Morgan, they control 169 million ounces sitting inside the COMEX vault right now. Roughly 40% of the entire exchange inventory, net to their off-chain exchange holdings, and you arrive at that staggering 750 million ounces total position. They're not just participating in silver market anymore. They are the silver market. Let's look at this a little bit different. With a scenario that you might or you can visualize. Imagine you're planning a vacation and you book a hotel that advertises $100 rooms available. You pay your deposit, get your confirmation number. Everyone looks legitimate. Then you arrive to discover the hotel actually only has 41 physical rooms, but they've sold bookings for 100 rooms because historically only about 40% of the people show up on a given night. That system works perfectly until the one night when you actually arrive expecting their room. What happens then? That's the COMEX in December 2025. And that 4-day vault drain, that's the night everyone started showing up looking for delivery. The mainstream financial press covered the silver price surge with an unusual explanation. Inflation hedging, industrial demand from solar panels, speculation driven by social media, but they completely missed the structural crisis hiding underneath. This isn't about investing sentiment or trends. This is about a physical shortage so severe that lease rates for borrowing silver spiked above 200% annualized in October. That means if you want to borrow silver for a year, you pay twice the value of the silver itself just for the privilege of temporarily access under normal markets. Now, conditions, silver lease rates hover around 0.25%. We just witnessed an 800-fold increase in the cost of borrowing metal. That's not a market signal. That's a distress flare. Have you noticed that every major bank, except JP Morgan Chase, or JP Morgan, my apologies, has been reducing their precious metals exposure over the past 2 years? Goldman Sachs excited most physical commodities trading in 2023. Morgan Stanley scaled back metals operations. Credit Suisse collapsed in their metal desk, got absorbed into the UBS, who promptly downsized it. The entire financial sector has been quietly walking away from physical commodities. Citing regulatory pressures and capital requirements and risk management concerns, everyone except JP Morgan. While their competitors retreat, JP Morgan doubled down, then tripled down, then built the largest private silver hoard in human history. The question isn't why silver hit all-time highs. The question is, what JP Morgan knows that spooked them into liquidation, decades of profitable shorts, and became the single largest long holder of physical metal at the exact moment when the exchange infrastructure showed signs of breaking. Now, you don't spend $4.8 billion repositioning yourself unless you're absolutely certain about what's coming. And when the bank that manipulates silver prices downwards for 20 years suddenly positions to profit from prices going up, that's not a trade. That's inside information manifesting as market positioning. The December vault drain took registered COMEX silver from 119 million ounces to just over 71 million ounces in 96 hours. At that depletion rate, the exchange has maybe 60 to 90 days before registered inventory approaches zero. What happens then? The promise can't be kept. What happens when paper contracts meet physical reality and physical reality wins? JP Morgan already knows the answer. That's why they hold 169 million ounces inside the COMEX system and another 581 outside it. They're not trying to corner the market. They've already have. And that's 4.8 billion exists everyone's talking about. Now, that wasn't a loss. That was the cover story for the biggest repositioning in commodity markets in their history. When the bank that spent decades keeping silver cheap suddenly owns more silver than most countries, we're not watching smart money making a bet. We're watching smart money taking control of the board. And the game is about to change in ways most investors haven't even begun to understand. Let's talk about what drove JP Morgan to make this historical flip. Because the evidence isn't hidden in conspiracy theories or anonymous sources. It's sitting in official exchange data, government reports, and industrial consumption statistics that everyone can verify. The numbers tell a story that the Wall Street doesn't want you to understand. The physical silver market is breaking, and it's breaking fast. Start with the lease rates we mentioned earlier. October 2025, the annualized cost of borrowing silver exploded to 200%. To understand what that matters, you need to know what lease rates actually measure. When industrial users or financial institutions need physical silver but don't want to buy it outright, they borrow it from holders like banks, mining companies, paying a lease rate for temporary access. Under normal conditions, silver is so abundant and liquid that lease rates barely register. Typically, around 0.25% annually. But when lease rates spike 800 times above normal, that's not a temporary shortage. That's a systematic breakdown in supply. It means the entities that normally lend silver have stopped lending, either because they don't have the metal to lend or because they're hoarding what they have. According to the London Bullion Market Association, silver inventories in London vaults, the largest physical silver storage hub outside the United States, dropped to 827 million ounces by late 2025. That's the lowest level in a decade, and it's happening while industrial demand is hitting all-time highs. Think about the timing. Lease rates explode in October. JP Morgan completes their flip from short to long by October. London inventories hit decade lows heading into winter. These aren't coincidences. These are pressure points in a supply chain that's running out of silver. Now, layer in the structural deficit that nobody in mainstream financial wants to even acknowledge. According to the Silver Institute World Silver Survey, global system markets have run a deficit for 5 consecutive years from 2021 to 2025. The cumulative shortfall now exceeds 820 million ounces. That means for the 5 straight years, humanity has consumed more silver than miners produced, and we've been filling the gap by draining down existing inventories. Here's where it gets personal for everyone watching. Silver isn't disappearing into investment vaults where it might come back to market someday. It's being consumed, physical destroyed in the industry applications that are growing exponentially. Solar panel production alone consumes roughly 240 million ounces in 2025. According to data from the Solar Energy Industries Association, every electric vehicle contains about 1 ounce of silver in its electrical system and components. I believe that number is a lot higher. I've talked about this in the past, but this is how this detail that I came up with today, how this was written. So, like I say, do your own research. We need to know so much that changes on a daily basis. So these details might not be 100%, but at least you have a baseline of what to look for if you're considering to start buying silver. Now, the artificial intelligence boom required massive data centers full of servers, switches, and cooling systems that all depend on silver, unmatched electrical and thermal conductivity. Total industrial demand hit 1.2 billion ounces in 2025. Global mining production is only about 830 million ounces. The math isn't complicated. We're burning through silver faster than we're digging it out of the ground. And there's no substitute material that works as well at anywhere near a compatible price point. Now you might be thinking, if there's a shortage, why don't mining companies just produce more? Here's the reality that should be concerning every investor. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, roughly 70% of the silver is a byproduct of mining. Other metals like copper, lead, and zinc, silver isn't the primary target. It's the bonus material that shows up when you're mining something else. That means silver production is largely dependent on the economic of completely different metal markets. Even dedicated silver mines can't scale up production. They can't do it quickly, at least. It takes 7 to 10 years to bring a new mine from discovery to production, and some say that is even longer now. Now, most of the easy to access silver deposits have already been mined. Meanwhile, industrial demand is growing at an 8 to 12% annually. Again, I'm considering that a very low percentage. I'm quite sure, at least with my math, it is going to be much higher for 2026 and going forward. One of those reasons is because of the new solid state Samsung batteries that are requiring a lot more silver than the average EV battery. Now, energy transition and technology build out that government worldwide have committed trillions of dollars to acceleration. This creates a mathematical certainty. Inventory depletions is inevitable unless demand collapses or price rise enough to destroy industrial consumption. And here's the critical point. Silver doesn't have a substitute. until price reaches economic prohibitive levels. Engineers at solar manufacturers have told industrial publications that they needed silver prices above $2,000 an ounce before it becomes cost effective to reduce panels around alternative materials. Current price of $59. Well, that was before the new all-time high price of silver, which is right around $66 now. Now, nowhere close to demand destruction, JP Morgan understood that math years ago. That's where their accumulating strategy started long before their recent public repositioning. That's examining how they actually built this 750 million ounce hoard, because the mechanics, sorry, sometimes my penmanship isn't as nice as I thought. So mechanics have revealed just how sophisticated this operation has been. First, there's the COMEX delivery manipulation. I don't know if you could see it, but there's sun coming in my eye, so it's hard for me to see as well. So I'm not trying to give you excuses, but now the exchange has position limits designed to prevent any single entity from concerning markets. Supposedly, no trader can hold more than 1,500 contracts in a delivery month. But JP Morgan found the loophole. Those limits apply to individual trading accounts, not to the bank as a whole. By spreading positions across multiple subsidiaries, trading desks, and client accounts they control, JP Morgan has repeatedly exceeded position limits without technically violating them. Between 2015 and 2020, they took physical delivery of tens of millions of ounces through the COMEX, slowly draining the exchange vaults while simultaneously shortening paper contracts to keep prices suppressed. They were buying physical at artificially low prices that their own paper seller helped create. The Department of Justice noticed this pattern. That's what led to the $920 million settlement in 2020 for spoofing and manipulation. But here's what most people are missed about this settlement. It didn't require JP Morgan to give up the physical silver they had already accumulated. It didn't force them to unwind their position. It was essentially a fine for the method they used. But they got to keep the metal. According to the settlement documents, JP Morgan paid the penalty and agreed to improve compliance procedures going forward. Meanwhile, the silver acquired through those manipulative practices remained in their vaults. The second pillar of their accumulation strategy involved SLV, the iShares Silver Trust. This is the largest silver exchange trade fund in the world, holding roughly 500 million ounces of physical silver on behalf of investors. And who's the custodian responsible for storing and managing all that metal? JP Morgan Chase. According to the SLV, prospectivists filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, JP Morgan has custodial control over the fund's silver holdings. Now that's about the power that gives them. They don't own that silver outright. It belongs to the SLV. Shareholders, but they control it physical in their location. They manage its movement. They make intimate knowledge of when the fund needs to buy or sell to match their creation and redemption. That level of operation control provides information advantages and logistical leverage that's nearly impossible to quantify. Have you ever wondered how the SLV Silver holdings sometimes decrease even when investors' demand seems strong. JP Morgan has a custodian has the contractual right to substitute bars, move metal between allocated and unallocated accounts, and manage logistics in ways that aren't always transparent to shareholders. There's no public evidence they've done anything inappropriate, but the structural arrangement creates possibilities that should make an investor think carefully about the difference between owning paper claims on silver versus owning physical metal. You can actually touch and put in your own hand. This brings us to the Hunt brothers parallel that everyone in precious metals market remembers. In 1979 and 1980, Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt attempted to corner the silver market by accumulating massive futures positions. At their peak, they controlled roughly 200 million ounces of physical silver and silver futures, representing hundreds of millions of more ounces. They drove prices from $6 to $50 per ounce in a matter of months. Then the exchange changed the rules. COMEX and the other exchange implemented position limits, raised margin requirements, and eventually moved to liquidation trading that prevented the Hunts from rolling their contracts forward. The price collapsed. The Hunts were bankrupt, and silver fell back to $6 an ounce by mid-1980. It became the cautionary tale about trying to corner commodity markets. Even if you have billions of dollars, the exchange and regulatory will stop you. But JP Morgan learned a very different lesson from the Hunt brothers' failures. The Hunts tried to corner the market with leverage, using future contracts and borrowing money to control far more silver than they could afford to actually own. When the exchange changed margin rules, the leverage killed them. JP Morgan is doing the opposite. They're accumulating physical metal, not leverage paper. They're buying actual silver and storing it in an actual vault. There's no margin. There's no margin call that can force them to sell. There's no exchange rule that can actually liquidate their position because they're not holding a position. They're holding the actual commodity. According to the commodity futures trading commissions, commitment of traders reports, JP Morgan's paper position in silver futures has declined dramatically since 2020, while their physical holdings surged. They excited the leverage, came entirely, and repositioned it into the one thing they can't be inflated away. Regulated anyway, or ruled by exchange fiat, physical possession. This is sophistication of their strategy. They spent years manipulating prices lower through paper contracts, accumulating physical metal at artificial suppressed prices. They paid the government fine when caught, but kept the metal. They positioned themselves as a custodian of the world's largest silver ETF, gaining operation control without ownership. And rights at the supply deficit became mathematically irreversible. And COMEX inventory started draining. They flipped from the biggest short to the biggest long. Wall Street analysts will tell you markets are efficient. That price discovery reflects all available information, that no single player can corner a global trade commodity. But those analysts haven't explained how JP Morgan accumulated 90% of annual global silver production, while lease rates spiked 800-fold. COMEX inventory dropped 60% in 4 days. The proof isn't in conspiracy theories, it's in exchange inventory reports. inventory demand statistics, CFTC position data, and the mathematical reality of 5-year accumulation deficit that's still accelerating. JP Morgan didn't stumble into a largest silver position in history. They engineered it step by calculating step while everyone focused on the paper price instead of the physical supply. Now let's talk about that's happening next, because the mathematics of this situation points to an outcome that most investors aren't prepared for. We're not making predictions. I am definitely not making a prediction based on a hope or speculation. Calculating results based on physical constraints that cannot be negotiated away. Start with the historical precedent everyone referenced, but nobody truly understands. 1980, silver hit $50 per ounce during the Hunt Brothers squeeze. Adjusted for inflation using the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index calculator, that $50 peak equals roughly $170 in December of 2025. So when silver hit an all-time normal high of $59 short time ago, it's actually still trading at a 71% discount to its inflation adjusted historical peak. Think about what that means. Silver reached $50 45 years ago, when industrial demand was a fraction of current levels. When silver in solar panels barely existed, when electric vehicles were science fiction, when entire technology sectors consumed maybe 1/4 of the silver in devours today. Back then, silver hit $50 purely on investment speculation, and the Hunt brothers attempted to corner. Today we have genuine industrial shortages, 5 consecutive years of supply deficits, and the largest holder of physical silver is the bank that spent decades suppressing prices. The Hunt brothers drove prices from $6 to $50 with leverage in futures contracts. JP Morgan holds physical metal worth potentially 10 times that inflationary adjustment peak, and they're sitting on it while registered COMEX inventory drains toward zero. What do you think happens to prices when the exchange can no longer fulfill delivery obligations? Let's examine the timeline, because specific dates matter when we're talking about future contracts and delivery obligations. COMEX silver futures operation on a delivery schedule with a certain months designated as active delivery months. Now there's January, March, May, July, September, and December are the primary months when contract holders can stand for delivery and demand physical metal. The next major test comes in January 2026, just weeks away, followed by March 2026. According to current COMEX open interest data, there are thousands of contracts scheduled for potential delivery in those months. Each contract represents 5,000 ounces of silver. If even a modest percentage of contract holders demand physical delivery instead of rolling forward a taking cash settlement, the exchange's registered inventory will face unprecedented pressure. Remember, registered inventory already dropped 60% in 4 days during early December. We're sitting at roughly 71 million ounces registered as of mid-December 2025. How many 4-day periods like that can we survive before the cupboard is bare? Here's what JP Morgan positioning becomes devastating effective. They control 169 million ounces inside the COMEX vault, 40% of total exchange inventory. But here's the critical detail most analysts miss. Not all of that is registered as available for delivery. Much of it sits. It's eligible status, which means it's in the vault, but not currently pledged for delivery against the futures contracts. JP Morgan can choose when and whether to convert eligible silver to registered, giving them enormous leverage over the exchange's ability to fill delivery obligations. Imagine you're playing poker and you not only have the best hand, you also control half the chips on the table, and you're the dealer. That's JP Morgan's position right now. They can squeeze other market participants without holding supply. They can profit from the price spike when delivery failures occur. And they hold enough physical metal outside the exchange that they don't need the COMEX to survive if the whole system breaks. Now let's look at about industrial buyers, because they're the ones who can play games with cash settlements or paper promises. Solar manufacturers need actual silver to coat the cells, these specific cells. Electronic companies need actual silver for circuit boards and components. These buyers can't substitute other materials without massive cost increase and efficiency loss, according to researchers from the Silver Institute and the CRU group. Now you could switch it to gold, but one, it doesn't perform the same as silver, and two, it costs a whole lot more. Now, industrial users would need silver prices above $2,000 per ounce before alternative materials become economically viable for most applications. That means industrial demand remains essentially all the way up to prices 34 times higher than today's price. Those buyers will keep buying because they have no choice. Solar panel manufacturers have multi-year supply contracts they need to fill. Electrical vehicles makers have production quotas they're committed to hitting. Data centers operators have build-out schedules they can't delay. All of them need silver, and all of them are competing for the same shrinking pool of physical supply that happens when registered COMEX inventory approaches zero. The exchange has three options, and one of them are good for people holding paper claims on the silver. Option one, they can force cash settlement instead of physical delivery, effectively admitting they cannot fulfill the promise. And betting in futures contracts, this destroys price discovery because the futures price no longer reflects physical supply and demand. It just becomes a cash settlement derivative with no connection to actual metal. Option two, they can change the rules again, just like they did during the Hunt Brothers fiasco, imposing position limits or delivery restrictions that prevent the crisis from exploding publicly. But unlike the 1980s, you can't force JP Morgan to liquidate physical metal they already own. You can change futures contracts rules all you want, but you can't make 750 million ounces of silver appear out of thin air. Option three, they can allow delivery failures to occur with contract holders discovering their claims are worth paper promises instead of physical metal. This would trigger a crisis of confidence in commodities exchange, generally potentially spreading to gold, copper, In other markets, where fractional reserves practicing are common but usually hidden. Every scenario leads to the same outcome. The paper price and physical price diverge dramatically. People holding SLV shares or silver future contracts might see one price on their screen, while people try to buy physical coins or bars face massive premiums and extending delivery delays. Now, we're already seeing early signs. Premiums in American silver eagles and other bullion coins have been running $4 to $6 over spot since October. And now, I don't know if you've heard it, but the U.S. Mint is no longer minting American silver eagles. Now, here's what should keep investors awake at night. At current industrial consumption rates of roughly 1.2 billion ounces annually, COMEX registers inventory of 71 million ounces, represents less than 22 days of global demand. That's not 22 days until price rise. That's 22 days until the exchange literally runs out of deliverable metal if demand continues at current levels. And we're not even accounting for investment demand or the possibility that more contract holders follow December's example and stand for delivery. JP Morgan's position for this exact scenario, their 750 million ounces equals 90% of the annual global mining production. Think about that concentration. They could theoretically withhold their entire hoard from the market for a year. And even if more mines or earth ran at full capacity, supply would fall short of demand. They're not just betting on higher prices. They're structured a position where they become the critical supplier in a market that's running out of product. Remember the 4.8 billion everyone thinks JP Morgan lost? That's calculated what happens if the silver reaches even half of the inflationary adjusted 1980 high, and half of the 170 is $85 per ounce. JP Morgan holds 750 million ounces at $85 per ounce. Their position is worth $63.75 billion. Even if they paid an average of $25 per ounce, they accumulate that hoard, and they likely paid less given years of price suppression. Their cost basis would be about $18.75 billion. The profit at $85 per ounce is $45 billion. At $4.8 billion, they spent repositioning from paper shorts to physical longs. That's not a loss. That's the cost of the trade. It's the ante they paid to sit at the table for what might become the most profitable commodity trade in financial history. And we're only calculating the half the inflation adjusted high. What if silver actually reaches $170? What if supply shortage pushes it higher as industrial buyers panic and investment demand surges? At $170 per ounce, JP Morgan position would be worth $127.5 billion. Contracts at $18.75 billion cost basis, and you're looking at a profit of $18.75 billion. For context, that's more than the entire annual profit of the most major banks. But here's what makes this different from a normal trade, where you're just betting on a price direction. JP Morgan isn't passively holding metal. Hopeless prices rise. They control enough supply that they influence the pace and magnitude of the price increase. When the COMEX registered inventory drops to critical low levels, JP Morgan can choose whether to supply metal for the entire inventory, potentially extending the game. When industrial buyers can get desperate, JP Morgan has metal to sell at whatever price those buyers will pay. When investment demand surges and premiums explode, JP Morgan's benefits from both the paper price increase and the physical premium expansion. The Hunt brothers failed because they used leverage, and the exchange destroyed them with rule changes. JP Morgan learned the lesson. Control physical metal. No paper contracts. Own the supply. Don't just bet on the price. Position yourself as an indispensable supplier in the market heading towards shortage. Then wait for the mathematics and physics to do the work. We're heading into January and March 2026. Delivery months with COMEX registered inventory at levels that cannot withstand significant delivery demands. We have industrial consumption that mathematically exceeds mining supply by hundreds of millions of ounces annually. We have lease rates that spike 800 times normal, signaling desperate shortages of available metal, and we have one bank controlling 40% of exchange inventories plus enough metal outside exchange to supply nearly a full year of global industrial demand. This isn't a prediction about what happens, what might happen. This is a calculation about what must happen. When physical constraints meet financial promise, when registered inventory hits zero, and at current drain rates, we're 60 to 90 days out. The silver market doesn't correct, it breaks, and a JP Morgan will be the only major bank with vaults full of metal, while everyone else holds the US that cannot be delivered. $4.8 billion exit. Everyone's talking about wasn't a loss. It was the cost of admission to the biggest trade of the century. Now, while the financial media writes stories about JP Morgan taking losses, they're not asking the only question that matters. What do you call it when you spend $5 billion to position yourself on the dominant holder of a commodity that's heading into the mathematically certain supply crisis? You call it the smartest trade nobody saw coming. And it's unfolding right now, in real time. While most investors are trying to figure out why silver hit an all-time highs and why their coin dealer can't get inventory, the answers are in the vault at 383 Madison Avenue in New York. And that's just a little bit crazy, in my opinion, and that's why I brought it to you today. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Please share, hit the like button, smash the like button. I'm trying to build a show, and I do appreciate all of your support. God bless, and have a great rest of your day. Christmas and the New Year's is coming up. Please be safe out there, and have a great time with your family. God bless.